Welcome back, everybody. Could I have your attention for a second? Since we are paramedics, we know how to adapt, and we're going to have to adapt. The ladder that we need for the picture is not available yet. So we're going to do our next two sessions, and then we'll do the photo right before lunch. So we're gonna adapt. So take your seats. And if our next speakers would make their way up. Give me a second here. We had a little bit of a change in our internet connection, so I have to recreate a link here. And B2 for this one? B2. Okay, I'll do that later. Okay, so welcome back. We want to thank our sponsors again for making this opportunity possible. Now we have a group presentation. Mary Ehlers, Kurt Bashford, Eric Bunzow. Is Dudley? Dudley? Okay, Dudley's here. And Josephine is here. Okay, all right. Very good. So we'll let you guys take over. Maybe. I did say we have to adapt, right? There we go. Doing more adapting than I like to do. There we go. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me all right? I'm a little short for the podium, and I get to hide behind it this morning. Put it down. Talking closer to it. Is that better? Okay. This morning, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge Anne and her leadership for the 4.0 curriculum and everyone in this room that has been a participant in that to bring it forward globally. So we're going to take a look at this morning curriculum design just a little bit and how we're going to bring that forward and some of the unique and crazy things that we have to consider while we're doing that. For those of you that are true educators in the world, you're going to know what these three terms mean. So, but we're going to make it simplistic for everyone else that we need to know what the paramedic will need to know and what they will need to do to be able to be a community paramedic. And those, again, that are educators in the room will know that there's a lot of detail that goes behind the scenes to create an instructional design program. And that in accredited institutions, there are actually those professionals that are in place to make sure that that curriculum happens appropriately. But for all the rest of us in the group, I tried to simplify this as much as possible, that we have a common sense model and system, and that is what our overall goal of the quality instruction will be, that we need to make it appealing. And it has to sustain motivation of all our students. Please note that I highlighted this, that we're going to grab your attention by surprise. It needs to offer relevance when we bring that curriculum forward. We need to build student confidence so that they're competent when they walk out our door. We need to be able to have feedback, and we need to be able to embrace that feedback to take us to the next edition of the curriculum to be able to carry it forward. And our outcomes need to be useful. We need to truly make a difference in healthcare. What we have to look at in the beginning before we even start is what motivates the student today. And as Peter said yesterday, what happened yesterday and in education yesterday isn't what's happening today, and it certainly isn't what's happening tomorrow. So we had to start yesterday to plan our course for today to take us and drive us into tomorrow as we develop and implement the curriculum that Ann's bringing forward. We have to make sure that that learning experience for the student is real and useful in their life, that they feel self-satisfied when they complete the program, that they're given the autonomy, and they are allowed innovation within their learning experience, that they build collaboration, because as we've heard from all the speakers, that collaboration is important. And we have to watch that entertainment level, because it's great to watch video clips that are entertaining, but if we're not learning at the same time, we haven't accomplished the task that the curriculum was set out to do. And we have to embrace technology. Many educators old school are really struggling with that, and we need to look at it at the future and now, and I see them all struggling today. We face increasing challenges as educators. It used to be we could sit down at that table and plot out our curriculum. And looking at it today, looking back, it now is easy. Back then, it was not that easy. But now we have to integrate the digital age and look at all the mobile learning experiences that our students have. I mean, when we have elementary school students that are assigned iPads, they take it home, they do their assignment on their iPad, then the parent needs to be educated also. So we have a lot of power to make choices as we deliver this curriculum as it comes forward, and we want to give the opportunity of the best blended learning experience we can do. Simply adding technology to the classroom isn't enough. We need to educate now our students and our teachers to the technology that they need to use to deliver the education and develop the knowledge of the students. But that's only one piece of the puzzle. We have all the field technology. If we expect our students and those community paramedics to go out in the field and be able to be educated and be able to know what all those handheld devices mean and how to use them and what happens if something goes wrong, we also need to accommodate for that within the curriculum in the classroom. This is one example that recently was published for a new device that's coming out in the field. One experience I had on the flight here, I happened to sit next to a CV ICU or cardiac ICU nurse, And it was perfect conversation because being a nurse and a community paramedic and sitting next to a nurse gives me a great opportunity to explain community paramedicine and see how the person reacts. So as we did that, she said, you know what, you have a great point with the technology piece, not only in the classroom, but the devices. She said, we just had a brand new nurse come to the cardiac ICU, and if only they had taken the time in nursing school to teach EPIC, do you know how much that would have impacted the care and that transition period of that nurse coming into the ICU, that we didn't have to worry about that whole technology piece? And I said, you're absolutely right. So we need to drive that whole concept in the classroom. Our technology expert.
Well, I don't know about that, but we will talk about some technology, and we'll see if we can have a little bit of fun with it. I can guarantee there'll be some fun at some point. So, tying technology in with what you do, and I heard elements of it from earlier presentations, and tying in with what Mary just described. Let's go down. There we go. So if we think about it in technology terms, a version update, right? We're used to that with our software and our phones. Every once in a while we get one of these things that puts it out of commission for a little while, and then we start to learn the new features. So we know healthcare is going through one of these changes, right? Healthcare is evolving, and one of the big drivers in healthcare evolution, other than the reasons why it needs to evolve, is technology is allowing some of that to happen at a faster pace. And then the same thing on the EMS side. So, a lot of us are familiar with the EMS 3.0 terminology that came out a year ago or so. We look at it because some of this can be scary stuff. So from the medic point of view or the provider point of view, the technology should empower you to do really what you do and perhaps just do it a little bit better or easier. So it needs to empower you and not take away from your patient care, which is your primary mission, right? So what are you going to get out of it? It's going to be perhaps some type of diagnostic information, data, and data that becomes useful information that has to get somewhere, not just in silos for data collection. But how does it get there, and does it really transfer across the silos? So, communications, you can think about it in different ways. So there's the communications in what we do with our mobile devices and broadband, and does that work everywhere? I spoke with the gentleman from West Virginia, and they certainly have coverage areas where these devices don't work. And that's not unusual as you travel around. But communications in, are we speaking the same language, whether that be a digital language or the human language? Are we getting the information across? Are we describing things? Or is the information passed from the hospital to the CP, to the hospital? With Image Trend, they have their information exchange, health information exchange. So we have mechanisms to do this, but it's technology, and we have to embrace that. So what are some of the other considerations? Because tech's never easy, right? I'm going to get this positioned right here. So tech isn't always easy. So we have mobile devices, and I think that's changed a lot of the thinking, right? So some of the concepts that we can do now, we do this in our private lives, so we're not on such a big leap there. We have broadband in many locations, not everywhere, but we do have 4G LTE. FirstNet is coming, and I'm not going to steal any of Kevin's thunder because I know he's doing a presentation on FirstNet, I believe, later today, this afternoon. And there's some great capabilities coming out of there to help us on that communication side. But there's regulatory considerations, privacy, security. Why don't we just use commercial apps? So we don't end up on Facebook and we don't end up on the 6 o'clock news trying to defend why personal information got out there. So there are ways to do this. There are connectivity, and we can get past the regulatory issues, just need to be aware of it, and perhaps not just embrace some quick app that was posted to the App Store that probably doesn't address these things. So what kind of information? This could be information that your patients are gathering already. Some of the folks earlier talked about devices that are left behind in the home that are gathering clinical information for the patients that may set off an alarm or a trigger. The other thing is, the devices we wear. So my Apple Watch just updated past week, and it now gave me the option to trigger an alarm, I think, to me, and I can probably send it to somewhere else. So if my heart rate goes over a threshold and it knows I'm not doing any activity, it can let me know. And we've heard the story of the patient who had a Fitbit and had an arrhythmia, and they were able to go back into that data and see that this was not a unique application. So there's these differences, and there's some nuances in here. I'm not going to go too deep into it because I don't quite get them. Telehealth, telemedicine, and some other variants on that. What are the differences? So, telemedicine typically has that clinical portion, and that's what involves you. So if it's a tool and a technology that you're using in a clinical application, telemedicine. If it's more of an umbrella and data collection and information that we may look at more offline and to help us in the big picture, broader sense, telehealth. But it is confusing, and I've yet to find a concise definition that everybody can agree on what the differences are. So what else can we do? I heard some mentions before. I heard mentions of the ISTAT machine, clinical blood assessments. We can do those out in the field. Do we get the results there? Does it go back? There's variations there. A lot of apps for the mobile device. We have the power and the computing power in our pockets now, or on the vehicles that we have all this. What else can we do with that? And plugins to other peripherals. So that little round thing at the top is a digital stethoscope. So if they wanted to hear specific lung sounds or heart sounds remotely and capture that information, you can do that. Ultrasound, these can in some cases be a probe and maybe a small device. Otoscopes, things that if the patient went to the doctor's office, these would be common tech, but they can be stretched out to the field and become tools for data collection and information sharing for the community paramedic as well. So that's some of the standard ones, and we've probably all seen, or at least are aware of those. But there's a whole nother generation of technology coming, and the nextometry, as I call it sometimes, but the IoT, the Internet of Things, these devices that really are communicating and passing information without human intervention. Nobody's operating it, it's there collecting. So I guess you could say in that regard, that's my Apple Watch monitoring my heart rate and triggering an alarm and could pass that information. That's an example of IoT. So that's a whole nother generation that's coming, it's evolving, it's probably coming faster as we seem to get surprised that technology happens faster than we expected, but it always does that. So what can you use it for? Again, similar things that we may do in our daily lives, but in a controlled, regulatory, compliant way to make sure we're doing the right things with that data, getting it to where it needs to go, and protecting it. So whether it be video or video clips, helping in that decision support, especially in CP, we're dealing with patients that are not our traditional 911 experiences. So we get all this great education, but there's still differences, and you may want to share that information with the provider themselves or get somebody else in the loop, whether it be a specialist, have access to the records, and tie it in, as Mary said, with the training so that this isn't new the first time you hit the street. You're learning how to adopt and accept technology. All right. So saying all that, it's still not easy. And there's kind of some conflicting pieces here. One is it's hard, or is perceived to be hard, and it's disruptive. Disruptive in that it changes the way we do something, right? So think Epic, I've heard the name mentioned several times, in the hospital. We do a lot of business with hospitals. When their IT is on a new Epic implementation, they're undercover for 6 months to a year because it bogs them down. Change is hard, but they're going to get the benefit at some point. And the other school is, it's hard, it's disruptive, so we don't do it. The other school of thought is we get this shiny object syndrome. Oh, there's a new toy. Here's a new technology. Let's try that. And the balance is probably somewhere in between. So if the pendulum swings, that'll set it out. So we get distracted, squirrel. So I like to look at it, one of my authors that I like, Simon Sinek, he always says, start with why, don't start with the what. And I think this ties in with medicine applications as well. What's the need? What's the pain point? So if it's going to be a technology to apply, it should be doing something to help make your jobs easier, make outcomes better, make the patient experience better. I should say triple aim, right? We got to throw that in there. So what's the value prop? So if it's business terms, and we're in the medical business. So it's either making money, saving money, or improving outcomes. That's kind of what it boils down to. So when you're looking at technology and you're looking at applications, those should be kept in mind. So it's not just a shiny object, but it's an appropriate shiny object. And again, going along the idea of disruptive thinking. So, an example I often use, back before Henry Ford started mass producing cars, and he did this. And one of his sayings was, if I would have asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. We don't always think 2 steps ahead. That's why we have innovators and people that kind of push us in that direction. But we have technologies that we're seeing. So Uber's a disruptive technology to the transportation system. And here's an article talking about patients using Uber instead of ambulances. Delivery. And I look at this and, yep, I've adopted a lot of these things. I use Uber and I use Amazon all the time. But getting medications and supplies out to where they need to go. We have some capabilities there. And Uber probably is going to be going driverless. So again, disruptive thinking. Some of us embrace that. Some of us say, never. But it's probably coming. But it's a disruptive thing. Changes the way we operate. Another application, kind of a no-brainer here, but we can share vast amounts of information. So whether it be through an HIE, sharing patient information between the networks, or library information, or policies and procedures, the talk to Watson idea. We have this capability now. So my mission to you is kind of be bold, think outside the box as you're thinking about some of these technologies. I'm going to read a paragraph. I don't like to read during presentations, but I think this one's a good one here. And I'm reading because I can't remember it, because apparently with the geriatric threshold lower than we thought it was this morning, I fall into that category. So 2 things happen when you get older, right? Everybody knows. One is your memory doesn't work so good, and I can't remember what the other one is. So I'm going to read. But what I'm reading is actually from that EMS, Health 3.0 article, and it turns out that the authors are our very own Gary Wingrove and Kevin McGinnis. So if you guys remember, I'm going to spit some of your words back at you. So while data is nice, information is key to identifying evidence-based technology. We need agencies that are willing to be on the front in creating the evidence base, and we should not all take the position that we can only do things that are proven by evidence. If we do that, we'll never be part of the solution. Take evidence-based practice with a grain of salt and stick your neck out and be one of the evidence creators. Do it, though, with your practice rooted in research. That'll make you and your agency a contributor to science. So that's a little bit of preaching to the choir, because I think those in the CP realm are already innovators in their own right, stretching the normal means, and are already thinking outside the box. So I think that's a great segue. I'm going to change hats. I am now Dudley. Unless you really like this part, then I'm still Kurt. So Dudley was kind of poking our thinking a little bit about the use of drones and how that might parlay into EMS and CP. And some of the things that are possible. And this is another evolving technology. And you'll see in a minute, it was actually somebody let it out of the bag yesterday, but it's quite timely. So what can we do with another tool that's a technology tool? So here, so we're going to play this video. I'm hoping if I click here, let's see, if you do it from there, that'll probably definitely, there you go. Thanks, Mary. Interesting, right? So we've seen this before. We've seen it. Amazon's talked about this, but relaying some of these thoughts. How might some of these texts work in other realms? So there's been other cases on the news. This one, I believe, puts an antenna on there to pick up pendants and things that walk-away patients may be wearing and finding people that are lost. There's another video here. Let's see if we can do this one. Oop. I clicked. Not good. See, technology. There we go. This one a lot of you have probably seen before, but there's an interesting tie-in.
112 operator, what is your emergency?
It's my dad. I think he had a heart attack. Please help. He's not breathing anymore.
Please stay calm. What's your name?
Joanna.
Good. Joanna, we've got your location. The ambulance drone is on its way. Remove his top shirt to uncover his torso.
Okay.
Great. Can you go to the nearest exit? The ambulance drone is almost there.
Okay. I'm outside.
I'll be talking through the drone now, so you can put down the phone.
Now please pick up the drone and bring it to your father.
You're doing great.
Okay, pull the green lid. Now place the pads on your father's chest. Good, I can see that the pads are properly applied. Joanna, please stay clear of your father. We'll take it from here.
Right. So I think a lot of us have seen this video before. Miraculously, he survives. We get the concept. And I look at that and I wonder if this was real here. My daughter could do that, just like his did. I'm not so sure my wife could or would. I don't know where the distinction is
I'm
there.
Alec Momon. I'm a graduate student at the TU Delft.
But on Friday, and somebody alluded to this yesterday, so we tend to think, and I do, right? So I'm from the US, so we sometimes have the perception that until it happens here, it's not real, even though there's great stuff and advanced stuff happening before it happens here. So that drone video was a European video. Reno, Nevada is looking to do this. We're in Nevada. It's 450 miles. I looked that up, so it's not right next door. But they are an innovative group that rents a group up there, has partnered with this drone company to deliver AEDs, just in the hypothetical video that we saw prior, the concept video. So this stuff is real. It just sometimes takes it to happen in our backyard before we tend to absorb it, or you have to kind of see it and feel it and touch it, that it is. But it's here. This just came out in EMS World, had a press release on Friday about it. So it's quite timely. So I know Dudley would have been happy to show that. He is actually at the Aeromedical Transport Conference, and which is why he couldn't present here today, or he would have been covering this and would have done a better job than I did on drones. And that wraps it up for my part. And I'm going to transfer the mic to Eric here, and he is going to that part.
Can you hear me? Hi everybody, I'm Eric Bunzo. I'm an amateur drone pilot. In my off time during the day, I'm a Pyxis technician full-time for 12 years. I'm going to go back in the timeline and it'll get to where I actually had direct patient care. Prior to Pyxis, I worked as a pharmacy technician, so Pyxis stole me from the hospital to go and work for them. Was there for 3 years. Prior to that, I was doing volunteer fire department in a town near Saginaw, Michigan. That's where I grew up, and I stuck around there, did a little bit of time in the military. Leading up to current day, how I got involved and why I'm here is because I was out flying or going to fly my drone for a new intersection in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I live, and I was a little too close to University Hospital where our air care, our level 1 trauma center is in Cincinnati. I called air care dispatch because it was far enough away from the airport but too close to the hospital for comfort. And I'm more reasonable with EMS because I've been there, I've done that, and I'll probably go back to it later in life. Pyxis kind of consumed my life, so I was not able to do any more volunteer on the fire department. But I called Air Care, and that's where I got a hold of Mary. Mary and I started talking, and that's why I'm here today. A lot of things you have to remember. FAA regulates where we can and can't fly. There's very little space in Vegas that we cannot, or that we can fly. We cannot fly on the Strip. I don't know why, but I would love to have that drone out there. I just flew it yesterday, went to the Grand Canyon. But with EMS, one of the things we cannot harass EMS workers. So first responders, police, fire, ambulance, we cannot harass you. So we are not allowed to get like right in your face with the drone and on the scene of a fire. TFRs is a temporary flight restriction that is put in place by the FAA when the fires in California are going on. Drone pilots cannot fly around them. There was one time recently in California, a guy was charged with 17 counts as a felon for flying his drone because there were 17 different aircraft in the area and they all have to be grounded because of the drone. So me, I've been in your shoes. Not specifically in everybody's shoes, but I've seen the other side where Ann and I were talking this morning about her son or daughter wanting a drone, saving their money for a drone. A lot of parents out there will go and buy their kids a drone and not care about the FAA at all. They won't look at what restrictions are in place, and there's a website that I go to know that I can't fly in Vegas or I can't fly near the Hoover Dam or anything like that. So I'm being responsible about it and watching out for a possible helicopter that could have 3 or 4 bodies on board, whether it be flying around the Vegas Strip or transporting a patient to the nearest hospital. I don't know what's in that helicopter, but I have to yield to all manned aircraft because the drone is not. I did bring my drone here today, and I actually brought a special delivery in town with it, but I've only been limited to 2 minutes of flight time because the casino does not like that. So I am going to take a minute, and I'm going to go back here and get it going. I need you up here. What? They said no. I'm grounded. So I can't do it at all. Okay. I will carry it then. But you should stay up there, Gary. So normally, this thing would push off a lot of air because of the downdraft. does sound like a swarm of bees. No, because it won't. No. So. One of the other flight restrictions, like I said, was, or where I was going with it, was I can see everything on my iPad. I mean, I could turn it on, I just won't start it, so you guys can kind of get a visual. It is very disappointing that I couldn't throw it up in the air. I mean, I've got the room to do it. The biggest concern that I always have, though, when I fly is the fact of helicopters. They say that the area around an airport is 5 miles. That is where a lot of times you have zero, you're not able to see it all. However, the FAA has a website that they put up there that allows me to go up to 400 feet where I live. So I kind of annoy my neighbors sometimes. This is my first time in Vegas too. And for the other first timers, when you walk out onto the casino floor, look up. Big Brother's watching. Another thing about the drone and why I did it, I actually have 2 real estate licenses now. And one thing that I will be doing is taking pictures of people's property for them. Once I get my license, I'm in the process of getting that now. But right on the front of here, you can see that's what I see. I mean, and I can turn it. That's kind of disappointing that they won't let me fly it in here, but maybe later. That's all. Yeah. We got to turn you back on over here.
So to conclude our presentation, I'll just say that we must integrate technology, as you've heard, and we need to make sure that our practitioners that are graduating from the curriculum program are competent, not only in their skill set for patient care, but also in the technology that's going to be available to them or that they're going to see in the community, that they're going to walk into, that they don't know exists in the hands of a patient already. And technology is not only for education, but we need in education, but we also need to educate to that technology. And do we have anything else coming? Okay, and that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, I need just 1 second here. Yeah. I've had trouble uploading it, so I had to do it on the disk. Okay, great. Our next presenter is also from Minnesota, and Dave Johnson's a community paramedic and has worked in a few systems in the state. And Dave, we're looking forward to hearing about your progress.
I think I'll be good here. All right, so this sounds super boring at the face of it, but I promise I have pictures, so I think that should keep most of us paramedics involved in things. No financial interests really that are relevant. One thing that's important to note, at North we use Epic as our EHR for our community paramedics to do our documentation in. But it's my goal to hopefully make this relevant to those of us who aren't on the Epic platform or maybe even on a electronic health record that we're utilizing. So before we get into it, it's kind of important to understand where North Memorial Health was when back in the spring, before we made a huge pivot in the population that we're working with. We had a very, we're really working to return to our goals of being really focused on the medical assistance population, which is the subsidized health insurance product for lower income customers for now. But historically, we've had a very large Medicare population, very short episodic visits that ultimately are very time consuming. I had notes because, yeah. But one of the things we found when we were looking at it was that when we first started the program, we were doing some billing of the parties individually instead of trying to run it through their insurance providers. So some of the staff was very sympathetic, so they were very much underreporting the time that they were actually seeing their customers for, so we'd only see like 15-minute billing increments at a time. I'm going to get deeper into the different approaches, but we realized that the biggest takeaway from this is, besides Dale's ability to make really awesome jib-jab videos himself, is that we have a horrendous business model if you look at our numbers. There's not many industries out there where you're able to succeed if you show that you were only doing something billable for 14% of your shift. We've been asked by our leadership to increase our productivity numbers to about 50% of the time that we are on staff, or that we're staffed, that we should be in a face-to-face encounter or doing something billable during that time. So we talked about the 177, or I actually didn't talk about it, but among our 8 providers, we have about 177 different documentation templates that are being used by our staff. A lot of them are personally designed by the team members for the way that they happen to do their documentation. Some are more complex, some are not complex. For our bariatric program, we have 3 different templates that people are using, which, as most of you can realize, is a problem that we quickly realized. But when we looked at it, you kind of get to understand why. This is the group of 8 of us that work as community paramedics. There's a couple stragglers in there that somehow migrated into our group as well. But if you look at the 8 of us community paramedics in our group, we have, I ballparked it at about 210 years of experience in the paramedic service. During our 5 years of continuous community paramedic operations, everybody has a different template. It's emblematic of the individual team members' personality, their clinic approach, and really how tech savvy they actually are. We have the seasoned group, and it's a small work unit in an organization of 6,000 employees. So being able to make some very organized, standardized documentation approach has been difficult, especially when we have, again, 8 people, 6,000 employees in our organization. IT developer time is really at a premium, so it can be difficult to get a hold of that time. But we're going to look at 3 different charts that were created by people in our department, and you can kind of see where we get a whole lot of difficulty in standardization. This is the exact same customer that we're working with. These are all redacted charts, but this is one of Steph's notes. This is a note that I wrote, and then this is a note that Rick wrote. Where's my back? Some of the formatting got a little bit wonky between these 3, so I apologize for that. But they're, over the course of about 2 weeks, talking about 3 nearly identical series of wounds on this customer that we worked with. But they're all very, very different in how they're formatted, which makes it difficult to extrapolate good data. So, a community paramedic manager and a doctor walk into a bar. After a therapeutic amount of water-based beverages, we actually got access to a really cool treasure trove of data. In Epic, it's termed provider efficiency profiles. It's something that we got access to through working with Dr. Susan Skywalker Pleasance, which is her actual legal name. But it really just means she's our hospital's chief medical information officer, which means she's a giant nerd with MD behind her name. And she gave us access to these efficiency profiles, which really is, again, American healthcare being a business, a nonprofit business. It's a way for us to exact as much as possible out of our providers so that we can maintain good operating margins. So it's mainly for physicians because they cost a lot more to employ, but we were given access this to understand how our department team members are utilizing our Epic software to do our documentation. It only looks at the ambulatory side of things, the outpatient side of things, because in the hospital, the docs just hire a scribe to follow them around and make their life a lot easier. The PEP reports come out as about 102 different data parameters documenting everything across the spectrum of how we utilize our software. 0 to 10, 10 again being near robotic. Our most efficient provider at North Memorial is my son's pediatrician. She's at a 7.2. Dr. Pleasance, that giant nerd with an MD behind her name, she's a 4.6, which I will show you later why I plan on using that little nugget to my advantage. Oh, go. I hit buttons. Uh-oh. What'd I do? There we go. All right. So those 102 different series of data, we were able to kind of parse down to about 64 columns that have data that we feel is actually applicable to the work that we do as community paramedics. There's a lot of things that are part of being a provider that are really just not important to us. But it talks a lot about how each individual member of our department utilizes. The top half of this the scroll is the spring. It's 21 days in May of this year, and then the bottom row is 21 days in late July, early August of this year. And we're kind of contrasting how our staff, the 8 community paramedics in our department, are utilizing the medical record. I'm at the bottom of the purple. My supervisor, John, is in the mauve or whatever kind of orange pukey color that we want to call that. Yeah. So it takes all this data and it creates these really fancy, pretty charts that this is my PEP scores and my utilization. And it kind of shows how I compare to the remainder of my department, what kind of things if I'm spending a lot of time after the end of my shift doing documentation, because it knows from my thumbprint that I'm in the chart and where I'm in the chart, what activities I'm doing, exactly how long I've been in there, and it calculates it all out back into these PEP scores that we're doing. We're going to zoom in on this because it really doesn't show up all that well, but yeah. So not a whole lot of context in the data. You really don't know what it means. It takes a while to read into this document because it's huge. And it begs the question, again, what does it mean? So this is where myself and my other fellow team members who are doing the line work begin to have some concerns about how the data is going to be used. There's a lot of uncertainty when you start tossing out terms like efficiency and optimization and standardization. It's good enough to make the paramedic inside of all of us really kind of bristle with discomfort. Click forward. This is what happens when you try to speak from notes. But the messaging at the outset of this was really important from our leadership. It was a coordinated message from Pete Carlson and Dr. Tangy that it's not good, it's not bad, it's data until it has context. They both come from the background of working as field EMS providers, so they understand the mindset that the rank and file team members operate. This was, when I started building this slide, this was the conversation I had with Pete, and it really contributes to my body image issues, so we'll keep on moving on that. So we want to know who actually reads our documentation. If we don't know who we're communicating with in the first place, we really have no idea which way to drive our document. So, sorry, I'm not good at reading and talking at the same time. But the data lives in another part that I don't have access to, but we do know that the most common utilizers of community paramedic documentation is other community paramedics themselves. We do get a lot of use by the physicians and providers that are referring us to see our customers, as well as the care customers who are medical assistants that work inside the clinic and kind of act as almost air traffic controllers or docents for our customers. We found that with about 30 years with North Memorial Health, Mike's our most efficient community paramedic. He's also really good at taking apart a hospital bed and fitting it somehow in his 1992 Acura Integra hatchback. But these PEP scores also began calculating a proficiency score this fall, also on a 0 to 10 scale. It's that number we see down after that. It essentially lets you know if you're using the capabilities of software to its fullest extent. Our beloved Dr. Pleasance carries a proficiency score of 10. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's just probably just as easy as distracted as our least efficient team members, one of whom you may recognize. So behold, you have our two least efficient community paramedics. You have our supervisor, John Riley, and then myself. I may be a little bit more proficient than John, who, as I showed in that slide earlier, can barely type. But he can hunt and peck himself one heck of a chart. So figuring out what we're going to do with the data to improve our workflows was really important. So we need to figure out what our medical record can actually do for us. There's a lot of medical-oriented software out there that accomplishes its desired task, but it's painstaking to deal with. Epic isn't necessarily that if you know what you're doing, just like any other EHR or EPCR software. If you're using them the correct way to their fullest extent, they're actually pretty decently easy to use generally. So what we're trying to do is to trim the fat out of our templates, hopefully trim down to about 10 core note templates, and then about another 10 kind of plug-and-play modules that our community paramedics are able to utilize when they need them, just to make their lives easier. We really want to use this in the context of we're using this software to make our life as community paramedics a lot easier, so it's less painstaking to try and accomplish something. We'll talk more about how those the PEP scores and stuff like that give us some insight for where we want to drive that. And also, if you've ever used Epic, you know that you are going to wear out your F2 key at some point in your computer's life, unless you're a Mac user, in which case it's function F2, which is kind of a pain in the rear, but it is what it is. We also realized we want to elicit some feedback from the victims. So as we're rolling this out, we want to make sure that our team members, our community paramedics, actually have a voice in what we're going to be deploying. So we have been starting to build little YouTube videos, push them out to our community paramedics as videos they can watch on their iPhones and see if that is something that how they feel about this. This was a care coordination note that we're just trying to get some feedback on and seeing if they like it, if they don't like it, and what they can do with it. So when we look at how I'm doing my documentation and then how everybody else in our group is doing their documentation, that's me right there, and then that's the rest of our group. Ideally, our goal is to increase the amount of these smart tools. That's kind of this pre-scripted templating that we have, and also increase the use of this note writer module as well. Decrease the amount of manual documentation because manually typing is very time consuming, and the data people here will understand it. You cannot exact good data out of it. So we can get into a lot of very good discrete data fields when we use smart tools and when we use this note writer, which I'll show you guys how it works in a little bit here. So here's some screenshots from our, I didn't show up as well as I had hoped, but this is from one of our test environments that, this is essentially what our community paramedics see when they show up for their shift at the beginning of the day, or when they're starting their day drinking coffee in their kitchen, because we don't actually have to report to a workstation to start our shift. We just go out and about and run around in our own personal vehicles. Yeah. So one of the things that recently came about with the most recent upgrade to our software in April of this year was this concept called pre-charting, where you sitting at your kitchen table at 7 o'clock in the morning drinking your coffee, you can essentially get all of your charts started for the day. And then when you walk into see your customer at 8 o'clock in the morning, you already have your chart already there to go. You don't have to remember what template am I using for this customer. It automatically pumps in this, or it pumps in the stuff that you were somewhat organized enough to be able to put in ahead of time. So you can see your 6 customers for the day. You already have your templates put in place. So we have that as an option. The other thing that we've been doing as far as leveraging the ability of our software and also pushing for standardization within our work group is we've pushed out these little speed buttons is what they're called, but they're essentially shortcuts for people to utilize when they, to give them access to a specific note. We have the ability to, people can push these out or have them programmed by them, they can program themselves into their own Epic profile, but we can also push these out from an organization standpoint too. So we can say, hey, these are what we'd really like you to be using. These are your pick choices, please use them. And then essentially what that does, you press that button and it brings you into the template that we want people using. We've tried to use templates that make it easier for people to utilize. This is a template that I'm still in the process of developing right now, but it's for our That's Better program, which is our ACO outreach program. And again, we're going to be mashing the F2 key as much as we possibly can when we're doing our documentation. So we want to make sure that the community paramedics have the ability to still do some very open-ended free text documentation that they that makes them feel like they're actually telling a tale. They're weaving the yarn for because it's very important for us to be able to tell our customers stories. It's what we do. We like to be storytellers. So we still have these abilities to do these open text areas. Anytime we see these asterisks next to each other, that's just an F2 point that we can hit to. But we also have some other things that we've done. Anytime it has this blue black background, that's the smart text. It's refreshable. It lives in other areas, discrete data fields within Epic that it's connected to. I didn't program or set up the screen grab as well as I'd hoped, but then we also put in some other things that just make it easier for people who may not be super familiar with this specific service line to familiarize. So we have these green things that are, again, you can F2 yourself through, and it just gives our staff some instructions. We'd like people to verify the address that they're going to and make sure this is where we actually saw the customer, this address populating from what their address or record is. Or, yeah. The other thing we've done to make people's life a little bit easier and to make sure that we're doing our due diligence is we've started embedding hyperlinks within our documentation. So people can click on this hypertension classification, and it brings us directly to the up-to-date document that, so if people want to reference up-to-date while they're seeing their customer, they have the ability to directly link into it in a window that pops up above their Epic. So that we can have them looking at the articles that we would like them to be utilizing when they're doing their documentation. The other module that we added, or that we want people using, like I talked about a little bit ago, was this note writer module, which is a really, really slick way and actually gets us kind of close into the way that we're used to doing a lot of our EPCR documentation. It's just very binary click boxes that back and forth. You can add a little bit of additional information on the stuff, but this is a big sea of options. And there's some specific programs that we work in that Dr. Taney would like to see some specific assessment points pumped in there. So what we can do is we can actually, much like those speed buttons, we can create macros that allow us to specify which assessment points Dr. Taney would like us to hit on. We just program this in, we push it out to everybody, and we know that we can incorporate the that's better macro into our staff, and these are our assessment points. If they want to do more, if they want to do less, that's on their prerogative. But essentially what this document here, or what this area does, is it pushes that information into and starts building your narrative. So you actually have a really decently narrative that's actually backed up by discrete data fields, which make data understanding a little bit easier. I think that was what I had. We're slowly making progress. Since our change from this spring, we had a really slumpy summer as far as volumes and stuff like that as we moved away from our Medicare population. But now that we're moving towards our medical assistant population, we're up to 20% of our billing time, which actually keeps us on the trajectory that we're hoping to match to get up to 50% in about 18 months. But it just begins with little baby steps. There's some individual coaching. Again, we have those 8 people that each have a lot of experience and have a lot of very different ways of doing things. So we want to make sure that we're getting our feedback as much as we can when we're working with our coworkers to make sure that what we're inflicting upon them is actually usable for them. We're just trying to take it nice and slow, deploy 2 new templates a month. Yeah. That's kind of the extent of what I had, aside from, this is the other pictures that I decided to use that couldn't fit really anywhere else. So that was way quicker than I had hoped. I'm staying here. Yeah.
Okay, if we could get the other group up, we're going to do question and answer time. And we are going to do the photo right before lunch. They're going to bring the lunch in while we're doing the photo. Okay, questions for our presenters?
Yes, we did it really well.
Going once.
Thank you. David, question about the hyperlinks within Epic.
Yeah.
Can you hyperlink to anything? Like, can you hyperlink to your internal medical guidelines?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a way we could do it. So we've got the hyperlinks built for a couple different things. In Minnesota, we have these quality measures that we use for assessing diabetes care or vascular health. So one of our programs, we have a really strong focus on diabetes and hypertension. So we actually link people directly to this specific external website. Or for our pediatric asthma project, we link them directly to the EPA's 10 Steps to an Asthma-Friendly Household. So really the sky's the limit with building your hyperlinks. As long as you have the link and Epic or your IT department allows you access externally, or you just ask for access externally, it's no more difficult than building a Geocities webpage or something.
I have a question for Kurt. Yes, this is
Next question, please.
This is revenge for your having used my AED drone video, which I was going to use later.
Yep.
But now I won't. Now, a question, I'm not sure that you know the answer to this, but the Reno program, the Reno drone program, the problem with that is the FAA doesn't allow drones to be flown out of the line of sight, which is going to be something we have to overcome. Have they come up with a solution for that?
So I only read the article. That's my extent of knowledge. I don't know if you have heard anything else on that, Eric. So if you read it, it says they've made this agreement that they want to do this and that they're working on some special arrangements to do something in their area. So yeah, I agree that there's the regulatory and the restrictions. So we're all kind of wondering how. But it's I thought the interesting part was they went and took the initiative and are actually kind of pushing the envelope there. And while I'm here, just for Eric, just if I can plant a seed of revisionist history from about 15 minutes ago, that drone was awesome flying around this room here. It knocked most of the papers off this front table. It delivered the card to Gary, and we were all pretty wowed. So just that's the seed I wanted to leave for that image.
Thank you.
So actually, as a follow-on question to that, which you may not know, there is an FAA testing exemption available. So I was wondering if you had ever dealt with that or worked on that process, because for most of these to be used, there's supposed to be FAA testing exemption in place before you operate the drone for a purpose like that.
There is exceptions, like I did actually one for 4th of July. It took them a month to get back to me. So just like any other governmental institute, they are slow. Federal, anyway. I have done it. It does take a little bit. You do have to plan. Now, this is different because we're in a hotel. I mean, I have flown in a bar before, but I can't fly in this big room. So I don't know.
We were just asking about the drone.
They saw it. It was awesome. Leave it at that.
Yeah, the exceptions, there are different exceptions that you can do. One is flying at night. I did one for 4th of July. I actually put it in 2 days prior, but I did put the paperwork in, and I did fly on 4th of July because my neighbor does do fireworks. So I actually have some good video from 400 feet up looking down on fireworks. So it sometimes you have to go outside that line.
Anyone else? Okay, Queen Anne, I think we're ready for the instructions for the picture.
So they're going to bring all the food in, and during that time, we're going to go to that hallway down that way. There's a big line of chandeliers, and we're going to have a line of blue benches that we're going to have specific people sit on, and then everyone else will just line up behind it, and we're all set, ready to go. So if you'll funnel, everyone smile pretty and go quickly, and we'll be done. You guys can eat.